We're looking today at sections 2 and 3 of the Harmony of the Gospels. And section 2 begins us in John 1, John's prologue to his Gospel. And he begins his Gospel with the same words that Moses began the Pentateuch, in the beginning. It's likely that John is deliberately alluding to Genesis 1:1. And although this is not a direct affirmation, I think it's a likely allusion to Jesus' eternal existence. In the beginning was the Word. The word logos, some people pronounce it logos. Logos is a means of communication. And God has always been a self-communicating God. It's in his nature to reveal himself. And the Son is the primary means of his self-revelation. So I think John is, well, it's true that in the first century, logos was a philosophical buzzword in Greek philosophy, as well as having currency in Jewish theology that had been influenced by Greek philosophy. I'm not really sure that John is trying to tap into any of that, though the ideas are similar. In the beginning, there was a means of communication, and that means of communication was with God. Now, for those of you who are taking Greek, the normal word for with is soon. It means to be in the same place at or together with. But this is the word pros. And pros implies not just proximity, but intimate personal relationship. To be with the Father. And so here we have a word, a means of communication that's with the Father, suggesting unity and community that existed within the Trinity, a face-to-face relationship. Okay. The Son is not an impersonal word, but we'll see that he's a personal word. The Word was God. Now, when you read the New World Translation of John 1:1, it says, and the Word was a God. And if you talk with a Jehovah's Witness about this, they'll tell you that the Greek logos, theos, ein, and the word God was. They say, look, the word God doesn't have a definite article, so that means it's indefinite. And it's saying, and the word was a God. Okay? That's probably the most that a Jehovah's Witness knows about Greek, and that's what they'll tell you. So let me put you one step beyond them. That is that in Greek, the absence of the article can indicate two things. It can either indicate indefiniteness, and that's what the Jehovah's Witness is saying, or it can indicate qualitativeness. Okay, and a quality is focusing on the quality communicated by the noun. Okay, so this is properly translated, and the Word was divine, was deity. Okay, it's not focusing on that it's indefinite, that is, a chair, a table, a this, a that, a God, but rather on the quality of divinity. Okay. So in the beginning, back there where God was the Word. The Word was with God in union and communion. and the Word was divine. So it's not saying the Word was God. It's not an equal sign that Jesus equals the Father. Okay, if Greek wanted to do that, they would have put the definite article in here. And if they'd have done that, then they would have been saying that logos equals, or logos equals theos. Okay, but they didn't. John didn't do that because his purpose was to highlight the nature of this word. Am I making sense here? As the slide says, the construction could be translated what God was, the Word was, or more simply, the Word was fully God, fully divine. And hopefully that little piece of Greek information there can put you a step ahead of the Jehovah's Witnesses who show up on your doorstep. So, here's the first quiz question. When John says the Word was with God, to what does the preposition with refer? A, Jesus was seated next to God. B, the Scriptures as contained in the mind of God. C, the intimate fellowship of Christ with God. D, the fact that God the Father is the final authority. And E, none of these. Okay? So, on your quiz, please choose one of the 5 answers, A through E. Word was with God. All right. The answer is C, the intimate fellowship of Christ with God. Hopefully you got that one right. Okay. Verse 3 says that all things came into being by Him. Okay, and the word by is the Greek preposition dia, which means through. And the idea is that Jesus is the mediate source of creation. Perhaps you're not familiar with the word mediate. You know immediate, and we know it in the normal sense of right now, immediately. But immediate means without a mediator, without anything in between, which is why it means right now. Mediate, then, is that thing which is between one thing and another. So Jesus is the mediate source of creator. The Father is the architect, planner, master designer. 1 Corinthians 8:6 says all things are from or out of Ek, the Father. The Son is the superintendent. We could call him the foreman, the mediate agent. All things are through the Son. And the Spirit is the worker, the laborer, the hands-on. All things were created by Him. And what I'm doing is I'm showing you the different Greek prepositions, ek, dia, and hupo, that indicate the different relationships that each person of the Trinity has to creation. So, did Jesus create all things? Yes. Did God the Father create all things? Yes. Did the Holy Spirit create all things? Yes. So, did they all do the same thing? Well, probably not. Each one had a role in the creation, and Christ is the intermediary between the Father's planning and the Spirit's work. Now, let me just take a moment to talk about what the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses say about Jesus being the firstborn of all creation in Colossians 1:15. This is more typically Mormon, but it'll show up in Jehovah's Witness dialogue as well. Paul says he's the firstborn of all creation, the head of the church. Okay, and so they say, look, the word firstborn is the exact same word when in Luke chapter 2, verse 7, where Jesus is Mary's firstborn son. Okay. First physical creation brought into being. And so Christ is the firstborn of all creation, and what that means is that God created Jesus as his first creation. And then, after that, Jesus created everything else. Which is why, says the Mormon, we don't believe that Jesus is equal with God, that he's actually fully divine, but rather he is, yes, he's the creator. So you got to be careful here because they'll use the same terminology. They don't mean the same thing. However, what they won't tell you is that the word firstborn can also be used to refer to preeminence, both in honor and in time. Romans 8:29 says that God has predestined us to be conformed to the image of Jesus so that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Now, how does us becoming like Jesus make Jesus firstborn, if it means first created? Okay? Clearly, it doesn't mean that. It means that he becomes the preeminent one. If, let's say that we're a family here, I'm the dad, and I say, I want everybody in this family to be like Denroy. Doesn't that elevate Denroy in the family? Okay? And because God has said that he wants everybody in his family to be like his son Jesus, that elevates and gives Jesus the preeminence. Colossians 1:18, Paul says, a few verses after 15, that Christ is the firstborn from the dead. Now, clearly that doesn't mean that he came into being, right? He had already existed, he died, and then he was resurrected. And he's the very first one to be resurrected. So that's preeminence in terms of time. He gets the first spot. Okay? And the result of him being the firstborn from the dead is so that he himself will come to have the first place in everything. So again, it's clear that this phrase does not refer to Christ's creation, but rather to his preeminence, both in honor and in time. So quiz question number 2 is, what does the statement in John 1:3, all things came into being by him, teach? Does it teach that God the Father is the mediate agent of creation? That Christ is the mediate agent of creation? The Holy Spirit is the mediate agent of creation? Both A and B, both B and C. All right? And the answer is Christ is the mediate agent of creation. Right. Now, just a comment about the quiz. I think the way I run this, at least I have in the past, is on this first quiz, I let the number that you get correct be extra credit on the first test. So if you miss questions, you're not hurting yourself. If you get them right, you're helping yourself. All right? So keep that in mind as we keep going. Now, please don't allow that to be a reason to say, well, who cares about the quiz? Okay. All right. Jesus, verse 4, is the source of life. In him was life. Notice that. Life was in the Word. And the life was the light of men. So life always refers to eternal or spiritual life in John. It never refers to physical life that I can think of. The word life gives light by illumining us to truth. Think then about the New Jerusalem, where there is no sun or moon needed, for the Lamb is the light of the city. The life in the Lamb gives light. Okay. So apparently that life's light will be physical or quasi-physical, whatever it means, that they don't need sun or moon. Verse 5, and the light shines in the darkness. Notice that present tense. The light is shining in the darkness.